Welcome to the General Election Candidate Forum for City of Tacoma mayoral candidates. I am Liz Knox, the moderator, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and the Tacoma-Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium, I welcome the candidates and the audience to this community candidate forum. At this time, I'd like to introduce Maureen Fife from the Affordable Housing Consortium, who will give an opening statement.
Good evening, and I want to thank everyone for coming to participate in the forum, especially our candidates. The Affordable Housing Consortium is a membership group of housing developers, those of us that have a deep desire to see more affordable housing built in our community, housing providers, professionals like architects and engineers and builders. And we are all working together to see more affordable housing built. And for years, we've been honored to partner with the League of Women Voters to do these very important candidate forums. So without further ado, I will turn it back over to Liz, and off we go.
Thank you, Maureen. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization whose mission for the past 100 years has been to empower informed and active participation of citizens in government. Candidate forums are one of the many ways we do this. Anyone 16 years or older can be a member of the League of Women Voters. For more information on membership, go to our website at www.tacoma-piercelwv.org. In ballot order, the candidates for Tacoma Mayor are Victoria Woodards and Steve Haverly. This year's general election is November 2nd. Ballots were mailed out on Friday, October 15th. If you are a registered voter, if you are not yet registered or have moved, you may register at vote.wa.gov by October 25th. Your ballot must be postmarked or placed in a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. on November 2nd. This forum is being recorded and will be posted on the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County website at www.tacoma-piercelwv.org. Questions have been prepared by the Affordable Housing Consortium and our co-sponsoring organizations. We invite live audience questions via text to 253-861-6824. Again, that's 253-861-6824. Questions must be directed to both candidates and may be reworded or consolidated. Our timekeeper today is Terry Baker of the League of Women Voters. She will hold up cards to let candidates know when they have 60 seconds remaining, 30 seconds, 15, and when it is time to stop. When you see the stop card, you may finish a short sentence. Please stay on gallery view so that you can see me and the timekeeper, Terry Baker. Please do not talk unless it is your turn. Please mute yourselves when it is not your turn to speak. The audience is on mute and cannot use the chat function. A reminder that civility is expected. I ask you each to confirm that you agree to our ground rules, which, among other things, include addressing the issues, not other candidates or their positions. Please confirm by giving a thumbs up. Great, thank you. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, the order of questions will rotate and each candidate will be asked the same question. At the end, each candidate can make a 1-minute closing statement. So the order of the opening 2-minute statements is in ballot order. Victoria Woodards and Steve Haverly. Victoria, your opening statement, please.
Great, thank you, Liz, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight, and also the Affordable Housing Consortium. It is an honor to be here with you all this evening. I'm Victoria Woodards, and I currently serve as your mayor here in the city of Tacoma, and I'm here tonight to talk about where we've been and what my vision is for the future as we address the affordable housing crisis that exists in Tacoma. I've had the opportunity to serve as mayor for 4 years and am from this community. I've been here since the age of 3, a proud graduate of Lincoln High School. And after high school, I ended up joining the military. to see the world and serve my country. And as the joke always goes, I got stationed right here at Fort Lewis, Washington. But that is a decision that I don't regret, or that's something that happened to me that I never regret, because it just drew me closer to the home that I love so incredibly much. Had an opportunity to serve as a parks commissioner, to spend 7 years on the city council in the past 4 years as mayor, and have a deep commitment to this community. As I talk about Tacoma, or whenever I introduce myself, I say I have the honor of being mayor of the greatest city in the universe. That doesn't mean that we aren't a city without challenges, and that we aren't a city without opportunities to grow and to be better, but that we are a city that works together. As I think about the next 4 years or another term as mayor, there are several issues I want to address, and one of them is affordable housing and homelessness. I also want to make sure that we transform this city, this place that we call the city of destiny, that we transform the city to live out its creed of being the city of destiny. And then I also really want to focus and make sure that we are providing good family wage jobs for everyone who lives in this community, so that we don't have an affordability crisis, or that we don't see people ending up on our streets. I'm Victoria Woodards. I look forward to getting into the details tonight and discussing the issues with you. And I look forward to serving you for another 4 years as your mayor.
Thank you. And now, Steve, your opening statement, please.
Oh, thank you very much. And I appreciate being here very much. So my name is Steve Haverly. I have lived here my whole life as well. Like Victoria, I lived on Fort Lewis till I was about 3-ish, and then moved into Tacoma, into the North End, went to Grant Elementary, Jason Lee Junior High, and on to Stadium High School. I've lived all over this city. While growing up in the North End, I've lived in Old Town. I've lived on Day Island, which is no longer, it's no longer in Tacoma, but I lived there. The South End, even a short stint over in Browns Point. So I'm in tune and in touch with the needs of our city, and with the different topography, excuse me, and the different neighborhoods and their different characters. I grew up riding my bicycle all over the North End of Tacoma, so I know these streets very well. I have been in construction development, land development for around 28 years, a little over 28 years. It's my thing I can do in my sleep. I dream about land development, and it's a big issue for us right now. Homelessness, our housing crisis, and our development crisis. Right now, I don't feel like we have a direction where we need to be. And that's what I bring to the table for Tacoma. Leadership in intelligent development, that's my goal. And I'd like to turn things around for our city and provide strong leadership that'll unify us, bring us together, because right now we're not only a country divided, but we're also a city that's divided as well. So I appreciate this opportunity, and as always, Victoria, it's great being in the same room with you, even if it's virtual.
Thank you. Thank you both. Now we come to the questions. Each candidate gets up to 90 seconds to answer each question. Again, the live audience can text questions to 253-861-6824. Again, that's 253-861-6824. There you see it on the screen, 253-861-6824. The candidate order will rotate with each question, so that for question 1, we'll start with Steve. Here's the question. Please offer your view of what should be the city's role in addressing its shortage of affordable housing for residents and shelter and services for its residents who are homeless.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we need to be clear. When we say affordable housing, we need to define who it's affordable for. We need to be clear on who we're trying to serve, and then we can have a better idea of what we need to do and what resources we need to provide for them to get this done. We can't just build housing for the sake of building housing. We need to make sure we have the infrastructure to handle it, to handle tens of thousands of people in the next 10 years or so coming into our city. So we need to really be careful when we push too much too soon. As far as shelters, we need to provide residents who are homeless. It's important that we provide them dignity. We provide them a safe, sanctioned place to live where they feel safe while they're getting their affairs in order. Many people that are homeless don't want help, and we need to be able to provide them services that they'll want to engage with. But I don't think it's very humane to let them live in tents and on the streets and in dangerous situations. So we really need to be able to address the mental health issues that go along with the crisis we're in, and provide them a good opportunity to turn their lives around. But we need to take care of our citizens in a humane way.
Thank you. And Victoria.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for that very important question. I believe that the city has a significant role to play in addressing the crisis of affordability in our city. At the same time, I just want to highlight for everyone to remember that the crisis is not solely of our making. Every city in this country is struggling with the impacts of COVID-19. And while it didn't create the situation we're in, it certainly did exacerbate it. So what's our role? What do we do? I'm really proud of the fact that we adopted the Affordable Housing Action Strategy. That is a roadmap of how this city is going to move forward to address the issue of affordable housing. 10,000 units in 10 years. And while that won't solve every issue, it certainly does give us an opportunity to begin to address the crisis. I also believe that as we talk about the homeless crisis in our city, the city is using every ARPA dollar we have. We're using every dollar that we have to really stretch those dollars. And to make sure that we're providing as many services and opportunities as we can. But that includes partnering with region and with the state, with our county and with our own city investments. It's really up to us as a community to support affordable housing and open more shelter beds with wraparound services. I believe that if we're going to provide affordable housing and shelter options, we've got to meet people where they are. And we've got to make sure that we're providing the type of shelter and affordable housing that meets the needs of everyone in our community.
Thank you. And this next question, Victoria will go first. The Home in Tacoma project's goal is to create a housing growth strategy to support more housing supply, choice, and affordability. Do you support the Home in Tacoma proposal? Why or why not?
So yes, I support the idea of Home in Tacoma. The fact that do we need to address our growing community? Absolutely. That's how we got into this affordability crisis, by not paying attention to the fact that our secret, I love that Steve always says Tacoma is the best kept secret, but our secret is getting out. And people are discovering how great this city is, and they want to move here. And if we don't do something to address the fact that people are going to move here, then we're going to continue to price out everyone who already lives here. So while I support the idea of Home in Tacoma, in other words, growing smartly, if we get ahead of this, we won't become like other communities. If we decide what we want density to look like in Tacoma, we can drive opportunity to those corridors. So while I support the idea of Home in Tacoma, not in its current form, I think its current form goes a little too far and a little too fast. But do I think we need to increase density in our corridors and in our mixed use centers? Absolutely. If we're going to talk about addressing the climate crisis, we have to do that by building more compact, more safe, and more accessible communities. Accessible to transit, accessible to grocery stores, accessible to community needs. And so, but we can do that if we're smart in laying out our city and deciding what we want it to look like.
Thank you. And Steve?
Yeah, we see eye to eye in that it sounds great. It's a great idea, but it needs a lot of work. My biggest issue with the Home in Tacoma idea, it's not so much the idea, but it's the existing neighborhoods that would be affected by overdevelopment too soon. I think we need to go into the neighborhoods that are boarded up first. All of our available land, the Pierce County Buildable Lands Report says we've got a lot of land to develop. And I think that needs to be our focus first, instead of the corridors that Home in Tacoma lays out would enable developers to purchase multiple homes and tear them down and build larger developments. If you go to West Seattle, you'll see a lot of that. It's like driving down a concrete valley. And I fear that that's what Home in Tacoma would bring to Tacoma. And no one wants to see North 26th or 6th Ave or even Pacific Avenue turn into a valley of concrete. We need to be smart about the land that we have and develop vacant land first, or underutilized land first. I live in a 100-year-old home, and I would hate to see it torn down and replaced with an 8-story or 4-story apartment building. It would destroy the character of our neighborhood, and I don't want others who feel the same way I do to go through the same thing.
Thank you. And for our next question, Steve will go first. Which policy tools available to the City Council would you like to utilize to create more affordable housing?
Well, I'm not in office, so I don't know exactly all of the tools that they have at their disposal. But there was a thing called the Municipal Authority, and it has been morphed into, it's been watered down from its original idea. I think there's the Tacoma Community and Redevelopment Authority Board now, and Homeownership Center Northwest. But if there's a way that we could use grant money to fund getting people started in home ownership, let them build their credit if they don't have it already, help enable them to grow their credit scores and grow their financial portfolios, and then we could repay the grant and have that act as a revolving account to help people get started in home ownership. There's got to be creative ways to get people going, and we also need to educate people on how to buy their first home, how to grow their wealth responsibly. It should be accessible to anyone living in Tacoma who has a dream of home ownership. And I dreamt of home ownership, and it didn't happen for me till I was 30 something. But the more information we can get to people at a younger age, then they'll start realizing how important their credit is to them, and that they can realize their dreams and own a home.
Thank you. And Victoria.
Thank you, Liz. So we don't have a lot of tools. Let's be clear about that. We don't have a lot, but we do have a few. So I talked earlier about our affordable housing action strategy. So we can focus our time and energy in a way that makes sense for building more housing in our community. I would also say we talk a lot about the MFTE, the multifamily tax exemption. And while that's a good tool, it's not a great tool because it wasn't designed to build more housing. It was designed as an economic tool. We need to continue to work with the state legislature to have it come forward as a true affordable housing tool. One of the problems with the MFT is that it doesn't address real affordability. It ties affordability to the county's definition of affordability, or to the county's area median income, not to Tacoma's area median income, which is about $20,000 less than the county. So while the MFT is a good tool, it could be an even greater tool if we get a little bit more work done and make it truly affordable. Another tool that we just got was House Bill 1406, which allows us to add 0.1% to sales tax to generate additional funding to go towards affordable housing. I think that is a great tool when we look at our partnerships with our public partners and our private developers. If there's a way to work together to be able to help pay for some of the infrastructure that goes into housing that is so expensive, then we have an opportunity to lower the cost of housing. So I think those are a couple tools. I know we need to continue to work with the state legislature to get more.
Thank you. And Victoria will go first for the next question. We often hear that market rate developers need to play a part in solving our affordable housing crisis. What role do you see market rate developers playing in addressing this issue?
Well, I think I kind of alluded to it in my last question. We've got to we understand that private developers are in it. That's their job, right? That's their livelihood. So we understand that they're not going to build housing at no benefit to them. But we can work with them to make sure that they're building it at a benefit to them and the community. That's why I talked about the MFTE. It does give them an incentive to build housing and to build it more affordable. But again, we've got to focus on what affordability really is. But I think that we have good developers in our community who are tied to making sure that their housing is affordable. But let's talk about the MFT really quickly, because I think this is a way that we can really incentivize developers, and we don't have a lot of tools. Talked a minute ago about AMI and how we tie the multifamily tax exemption to AMI. Pierce County's AMI is $79,000 a year, while Tacoma's AMI is $55,000 a year. If you look at 80% AMI for the county, that doesn't even get to the average AMI for the city. So again, in order to make them good partners, we've got to have good tools to work with them. And I think the AMI is a good one. I think the other tool at our disposal that we have to be very careful of, and that's the designation of anti-displacement districts, to make sure that people who are living there now aren't priced out of their districts and that aren't priced out of their neighborhoods and can still afford to live where they own.
Thank you. And Steve, your turn.
Yeah, like Victoria said, market rate developers, they develop this so they can make money, and new construction costs are ever rising, and yeah, it's going to be more difficult for developers to make money, and that's, like she said, that's what they're in it for. So I think a consortium is a better suited for the job. They know the actual needs of low income housing. It's what people really need. We have to define who, like I had said earlier, we have to define who our target is that really needs housing and really wants housing. We need to walk in their shoes and see how difficult it can be to get into home ownership. So I think housing authorities have more access to bond capacity. They have more resources that they're used to dealing with. So I think there's a better way than market rate developers, but we really need to also listen more to what the public is asking for, more of what they need. I don't think that we're listening to our neighborhoods and the individuals in our neighborhoods to find out what they need. And that's going to be a key to success in getting more people into homes.
Thank you. And before we go on to the next question, just a reminder that the audience can text questions to 253-861-6824, 253-861-6824. And for our next question, Steve will go first. In the last 2 budget bienniums, the council has allocated more than $2 million in total for the Affordable Housing Fund to provide housing assistance and create affordable housing units. If elected, what amount of funding would you support allocating to this fund, and why do you feel this is an appropriate allocation amount?
Well, being that I'm in the public sector, haven't held office before. I don't have a complete grasp on everything that our budget has at our disposal. So that being said, I'm not really up to speed on how to answer that question. What I do know is everything I've done in my life, I've been all in and been able to study and evaluate and move forward on. So I do feel like I could provide leadership in this capacity, but at this time, I'm not there yet.
Thank you. And Victoria.
Hey, thank you, Liz and Steve. I get it. It gets very complex very quickly. But is $2 million enough? Absolutely not. I wish we could put more of money in the fund, but the fact that we were able to put, actually, I think it's almost $2.4 million now into this fund to put something towards housing in a time, I mean, we put that money aside in a time when our budgets were suffering. And so that shows the council's true commitment to affordable housing. But I think we need to do more. But what we do know, and that's why we have the $1,406, right? Because what we do know is that for every dollar the city invests, with our public or private partners, that generates another $16 to $18, which then creates another, with bonding capacity, another $15 to $25 million that we can actually put into projects with organizations, not just private developers, but with Tacoma Housing Authority, Mercy Housing, a lot of our public nonprofit partners in building housing. In addition to that, just in the first round of our ARPA dollars, which is $31 million, we've set aside 31% of that money to focus on homelessness and housing affordability, like $5 million in ARPA funding to purchase a hotel that will start out being used as a shelter, but then turn into permanent supportive housing. It's using money for projects like that that's really going to address this issue.
Thank you. And on our next question, Victoria will go first. This is an audience question tonight. Even great plans need prioritization. How will you make sure that existing Tacomans have first rights to housing, and how do racial equity and historic displacement apply?
Love the question. So one thing that we're doing in the city of Tacoma, I'm going to start with the racial equity part of the question. We as a city know that if we did a study, if we know already without a study, that our BIPOC community members are least likely to own homes. We already know having access, having capital for down payments, all of those things. But because of what happens in the state of Washington, we need to do a disparity study in order to focus our funding on that. And we are in the midst of completing a disparity study that will actually show the disparities that exist. When that study is done, we will then be able to target down home payment assistance directly to BIPOC community members. So that's one way that we can address it. When we talk about affordability, especially with our nonprofit partners or public sector partners, there's criteria that they can put together for people who move into those projects that can't always be done in other projects. So when you talk about our partnership with the Rise at 19, with Tacoma Housing Authority, there's a certain amount of funding, a certain amount of units set aside for veterans, a certain amount of units set aside for homeless from Tacoma, and a certain amount of units set aside for those who are living below the poverty level. So with our public partnership, we can actually focus on a certain segment of our community and open up that housing for those members.
Thank you. And Steve?
Would you mind repeating the question real quick? I want to
No,
make sure I get it all.
Absolutely. That's just fine. The question, even great plans need prioritization. How will you make sure that existing Tacomans have first rights to housing? And how do racial equity and historic displacement apply?
Okay, that's great. And that kind of leads into our one of the other questions that we have tonight. So it's kind of good that we get extra time on this. Yeah, I've worked for years in Seattle, and in the last couple of years, I had architects come to me. It was always architects for some reason. They said, "Oh, hey, Steve, what's this? I hear about Hilltop. It's such a great place where my wife and I are looking at buying a house down there." I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's great. It's like the new happening place. I think you'll really like it." And then another architect, like a month later, "Hey, my husband and I are thinking of moving to Hilltop." And I'm going inside, I'm saying, "Okay, no, we want our own people to live in the new areas, and that we're putting all these efforts into." And I hate the fact that Seattle is getting so outpriced that they're looking at at Tacoma to come here and take up. So yeah, I wish there was a way that we could just keep it to our own, selfishly keep it to our Tacoma people, but that's just, it's not feasible. And I'm sure that would break some kind of laws if we only let certain, but still, I do think that there is a long history of inequities, and we do need to explore, just like Victoria said, we need to do more studies and get down to the heart of it and see if we can equal it out. But I'm looking forward to question number 7, because we can address it more there.
All right, and Steve will go first on this question. As mayor, how do you envision yourself working with the state legislature through the city's annual legislative agenda and general advocacy to push for policies to support affordable housing development in Tacoma? And what are those policies you would like to see the legislature address?
Well, much like I had talked about earlier with the municipal, what was the municipal authority, I would like to see us get more in touch with what federal grants are available to us, and use that as a type of a city bank to help fund people's dreams into reality, get them into their homes while they can build equity and build credit. And then once they establish that, then they can refinance and pay it back, and it'll just keep rotating. Especially these days, there's so much federal money that's coming down the pike, and I'd like to see us get more in touch with what opportunities the state and federal government can offer people. The money is there. We need to find access to it, and we need to talk to Lori Jenkins and get on the same page as her.
Thank you. And Victoria?
Thank you again. So let's be clear. It takes relationships to work with the state legislature, and I'm grateful that I've had an opportunity to establish some of those partnerships and relationships. Again, I'm proud to have the endorsement of all of our state delegation that represents any part of Tacoma, including House Speaker Lori Jenkins. And I don't throw that out there as in, oh, I've got all these people behind me, but I throw that out there because it takes those relationships to get things done. And I've built those relationships and have had a great opportunity to work with our state legislature on bills that we got passed this past year. But let's be clear, the issue of affordable housing has been on our legislative agenda for a really long time. And will continue to be there because the state holds a lot of tools that we don't have. I mentioned earlier the multifamily property tax exemption. That is a tool that is given to us by the state, and we continue to work with them to focus that tool in a way that's better, that we can use it better. I'd also like to see the state, we talked about it this year, but would also like to see the state provide more resources to local governments through a progressive tax revenue options that they have at their disposal that we don't have. The state can do a lot more, and we can do a lot more with the state in partnership. But we've got to continue to work with them to make sure we've got our state legislatures, but we've state legislators, but we've got to make sure that we're working with everyone across the state to make sure that every community gets the tools they need to address this issue.
Thank you. And this next question is an audience question.
I messed up.
Tacomans take campaign finance laws seriously. Are you keeping up with the required weekly campaign filings? If not, why not? This includes in-kind donations. And Victoria, you go first.
Great. Thank you. I've learned a long time ago that that's the most important thing you can do. So I hired a professional firm. I have for every one of my campaigns hired a compliance firm to do all my compliance with the state of Washington. And so yes, every one of those reports are filed when they're required to be filed, so much so that I don't even have anything to do with it. I hired somebody, signed a contract, and they get it done with or without me.
Thank you. Steve.
Well, this one's easy because I do it myself, because leading up to the primary, I didn't take any donations. I funded it all myself on a whopping $908.70. So I kept track of all my own funding. I'm listed as the treasurer on my own campaign. So yes, I keep up on it. There was a time in the very beginning I missed a step because this is my first time doing it, but I'm all good with PDC now. And since then I've had my one filing, and that's all done. And it took maybe a half an hour because, again, I'm not trying to raise a ton of money. I don't want to be beholden to anyone but the voters. And so I have taken great care in being as frugal as I can with this campaign and running it as much on my own as I can. But I will say I've had some great supporters who've donated a ton of signs in their efforts to get the name around. A few signs have upset people, and that's understandable, but it's all for a good cause. Victoria loves Tacoma, I love Tacoma, and Victoria, someone took your sign and mine down the other day. I placed them both up. I was going to text you the picture of that, but I figured, boy, this person doesn't know what they want if they took both of our signs down, but I put it back up. I'll text you later. You might get a kick out of it.
Thank you. And Steve, you go first for the next question. According to the 2019 American Community Survey, only 30% of Black households in Tacoma own their own home, while 61% of white households own their home. What specific actions would you support and want to see implemented to begin to reduce this disparity?
Yes, well, so funny thing is I've talked to tons of specialists over the last 4 months leading up to this and the disparities between home ownership. That's one thing. One reason I'm not a big fan of home in Tacoma is more rentals will skew these numbers. So I'd like to make sure people get more opportunity to buy their own homes. Two of my guys on one of my crews today educated me more in 1 hour of talking to them about this. Both Black gentlemen who are in two different situations. One has been renting to own a house for the last 3 years. And the other one is he and his girlfriend and their 2 kids have struggled to find affordable housing. And they really, really want to buy their own place. But it's been hard. And I asked them why they think that is. One said, hey, it's, it was only 50, 60 years ago, it would be against the law to sell, for a white person to sell their house to a Black family. And that really struck a chord with me because, we got a long way to go and we should be there by now. It's almost 2022 for Pete's sake. So he said, we weren't raised to think that we could own our own home, and that's heartbreaking. We need to turn it around and we need to listen to the people in the field.
Thank you. Whoops, Victoria.
Thank you. Liz, I was just going to start talking since I know I'm next, but thank you. This is probably where Steve and I might disagree just a little bit because of the lack of homes available for ownership. This is why I believe that home in Tacoma is so incredibly important. We're out of housing stock. There aren't very many houses to buy in Tacoma. And so I think building more housing in Tacoma is important. And I think more housing options is important. Not everybody wants to own. I mean, I am blessed and glad that I get to live in a rambler in a house. But some people want workforce housing. Some people want to live in a duplex. Some people want to live in a condo, right? Some people want to live in an ADU. So I think we've got to build more housing to address all that. But I also think that, as I talked earlier, we've got to be able to finish that disparity study, right? We've got to be able to make sure that we're providing down payment assistance and opportunities. I'll give an example of what we did. We were talking about home ownership, but when we got funding from the federal government during COVID to address the issue of people not being able to pay their rent and their mortgages, we were able, because of a disparities report that was done around homelessness, we were able to use that report to make sure to focus 50% of our funding on the BIPOC community through nonprofit organizations. So it's making sure that we have those kinds of things in place that are going to give us the legal authority to be able to focus our funding. And I'll stop there. I was going to talk about, well, I'll take 2 quick seconds. I'm done. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Steve?
Is this question 8? I'm sorry.
Oh, shoot.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I went the wrong way. This one is for Victoria. As mayor, how would you support nonprofit organizations and the Tacoma Housing Authority in developing the nearly 10,000 units of affordable housing that the Affordable Housing Action Strategy notes are required to serve demand by 2040?
Well, Liz, I feel like I'm repeating myself just a little bit, but I did talk about this earlier. It's not what we're going to do some things, but we've already done some of those things. So we have a proven track record. I mentioned earlier the Rise at 19th. That was a partnership between the city of Tacoma and Tacoma Housing Authority. When we look at the Arlington Drive project that was just completed, it is not only a crisis residential center for young people, but it's also a place for young adults 18 to 24 to live. And that was in partnership with Tacoma Housing Authority. So we know how to make these partnerships work. When we talk about the project on 9th and Martin Luther King, the project by Mercy Housing, that's for seniors in our community. We know how these partnerships work. What we have to do, as I spoke earlier about like the 1406 money, which again will generate between $15 and $25 million a year because of that sales tax investment through bonds, we have to continue to bring more partnerships like that to the table so that they can do what they're good at in building affordable housing. And again, getting back to your other question, how are we going to focus it on those who need it most in our community? It's organizations like the Tacoma Housing Authority who can do that. And it's partnerships that we have with them already established that we can continue to build more affordable housing in our community.
Thank you. And Steve?
Yeah, I think nonprofits are a great resource for information. This is what they're especially trained to do. They should know the ins and outs of finding the right way to take care of people's needs. However, we need to have more public forums. We need to have more in-depth conversations, like my guys today that I had that talk to. Think of that on a bigger scale. If the city council and the mayor and even city manager had more conversations with people in the streets and out in their neighborhoods to understand exactly what it is that they need, we would have a tighter grasp on exactly what needs we need to fulfill. I think in this, especially in the day and age of Zooms, a lot of that is lost, and we need to get back in touch with exactly what the people want and need and what they can afford. Like I said, I learned more from my guys today in a 1 hour long conversation about real world needs and real world crisis. So I think it's going to start with communication, and we really need a firmer grasp, a tighter grasp on what people need.
Thank you. And Steve, you'll go first for this next question. In recent years, we've seen many 9-0 and 8-1 votes on the council. Some may look at this as a policy alignment among members, and some may view this as a result of watered down policy proposals. As mayor, would you feel a greater responsibility to build consensus or enact bold, potentially controversial policy?
Well, I'm all for a 9-0 vote or an 8-1 if it's what the people want. That's the key. We're elected into office to serve the people's needs of Tacoma. And so while there is a lot of division in our city, there's the left and the right, there's all sorts of cultural barriers. As long as the majority of the people are being taken care of and every need is met, every need is heard, then I'm okay with the unanimous vote. It's tough to come by, but I think that's what a city council should do, and the mayor needs to lead that charge for unity, to pull people together, to pull the needs from both sides, all sides, and make sure that no one is marginalized or left behind. So they're not always the easiest decisions to make, and sometimes you'll get a lot of kickback, as Victoria knows. I mean, she's had a rough go, and she knows I have a ton of compassion for her in that regard. So you can't always please everybody, but as long as you're pleasing the people who put you into office, then that's got to be your goal. That's got to be the goal of the council, and it's that charge should be led by the mayor.
Thank you. Victoria.
Thank you. So I had the opportunity to serve on the city council some time ago with Councilmember Marty Campbell. And he said something one day that that didn't hit me then as much as it hits me now as the mayor and the leader of this council. And that was that a 5-4 vote is politics. A 9-0 vote is leadership. Let me explain to you what that means. That means that we disagree. If you all watch the city council, we disagree all the time. But when you can take a policy and work it through so that it gets a 9-0 vote, that means that all of the 9 council members who are sitting on the council are respectively thinking about their communities and hearing from their communities and doing the best by their communities. So in my opinion, a 9-0 vote is not just a rubber stamp. A 9-0 vote means that we worked together despite where we disagreed, and we came up with what was a compromised option for the city. Now, not compromise for the sake of just compromising, but it's a collaborative effort. You have 5 different districts in the city represented by 5 people, and then you have the other districts that are represented by 3 at large and a mayor. We all come with different viewpoints, shared backgrounds, and different life experiences, but we represent our communities. And that's why a 9-0 vote says that we worked hard. Now, we don't always get there, but I'm convinced as the candidate who has the endorsement of all 8 council members that I know how to bring the council together to achieve what Tacoma needs.
Thank you. And that was our last question. Now it's time for closing statements for 1 minute per candidate. They'll be in reverse of ballot order. So we'll begin with Steve.
Well, I appreciate this. Thank you very much for having me aboard. Victoria, as always, it's a pleasure getting to talk with you. Yes, I have not held office before. I do have 28 years of leadership. Not to mention my father was a captain in the Special Forces Green Beret. He taught me from a very young age how to be a great leader. How to get things done. In my line of work in construction management, you don't have a choice but to succeed. If you don't succeed, you are out of a job. So I've taken building a project is much like running a city. You have to pull all of the trades together, all of the different personalities together, different people of all different walks of life in order to get the job done. You have to lead harmony, sometimes hundreds of people. And in doing so, you have to accommodate everyone's needs. And that's what I bring in leadership to this. Sorry, I didn't see the countdown. Thanks for having me.
Victoria.
Thank you, Liz. And let me first start again by saying thank you for holding this forum tonight. I think it's really important for everyone to hear from the candidates on what their vision is for the city, especially as it relates to the priority of affordable housing and homelessness. I've had an opportunity to live in Tacoma most of my life. And I've had an opportunity as a young person growing up in this community poor to live in almost every neighborhood in this community. And I think that everyone who chooses to call Tacoma home should be able to find something affordable and have a roof over their head every single night in any neighborhood they choose to live in. It's been a rough 19 months. It's been a hard 4 years, but I am resolved now even more than ever to know that this city can come together, that we can work together to make sure that Tacoma is a place where everyone can succeed and where we can address these really tough issues together. Because truly, Tacoma, we are stronger when we work together. And I'd love to have your vote on November 2nd. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. This concludes our forum tonight. In ballot order, the candidates for mayor of Tacoma are Victoria Woodards and Steve Haverly. You should receive your ballot and voter's pamphlet very soon if you haven't already. Be sure to vote early and no later than November 2nd. I would like to thank the candidates, Maureen Fife from the Affordable Housing Consortium, the timekeeper, Terry Baker, the Tacoma-Pierce County League of Women Voters, and the Affordable Housing Consortium for sponsoring this forum. You can see other League of Women Voter candidate forums at www.tacoma-piercelwv.org. Be sure to read your voter's pamphlet. Look at vote411.org, where you can find answers to questions posed to all candidates running for office. Read the candidates' websites and do all you can to be an educated voter. And don't forget to vote before November 2nd. Thank you and have a great evening.